Welcome back to Listen for Real. I am Jennifer Brown, and I am so thrilled you joined us again. This episode is a continuation of my conversation with Sean Smith. If you didn't hear our last episode, I really encourage you to check it out. We talked about some really heavy and important stuff, but it's also a beautiful lead in to what we're talking about today. We left you with a bit of a cliffhanger. Sean has a story to tell. And Sean, I thank you for being here again, because this date is so significant to you, and that you were willing to spend it having a conversation with us is huge.
Yeah, when you offered this date as a recording date, I thought this is really cool. You know, I haven't done a whole lot today, but I would love to record this podcast with you specifically about this topic.
Yes.
Today is the 35-year anniversary of the day that I, by all accounts, should have died. When I was a 13-year-old boy riding my bike to school, I got run over by a car doing 50 miles an hour. And all the details of the accident, point to that should have been my last day. And so this day is always meaningful to me. It's a moment of reflection and gratitude and celebration of a second chance that I received that day. And it fundamentally changed the way I see the world and myself and my parents and success and all the things that were really meaningful to me. So it's been an honor to not just record this podcast with you, but record it on this day because of what it means to me.
Will you, do you mind saying a little more? Because it is not often that a 13-year-old, even with that profound experience, and again, I have not had your lift experience, so of course I'm saying this. So this speaks to everything we've been talking about, but that you had that deep, deep awareness and knowing that, that life is absolutely precious and that you cannot waste one iota of it. And you talk about it in your bio, but would you just expand upon it a little more here? Because not many 13-year-olds have that kind of presence of mind in the first place.
Yeah, thank you for asking to expand. I actually wrote a poem last year. If you're okay with it,
oh my gosh, yes,
I'd love to read it.
Please.
As a 13-year-old, I, like probably most 13-year-olds, at least from our generation, I was immortal. I mean, I knew I was going to die and people die one day, but I was immortal. Like, I wasn't going to die today. And I'm just living life, with this reckless abandon. And I was actually in a really, really positive place in my life, because just a few months earlier, my 13-year-old baseball team with Dominic on it, I don't think I said his name up until now, but the significant conversation I've been talking about with racism, we went to the Little League World Series. And so we didn't win the entire World Series, but we became gods in our hometown, and this is back in the days, well before the internet and so forth, but we became celebrities in our hometown. And so we were all just riding high for months and months and months. We had a parade, like hundreds of people gathered at the airport. Back in the day, this is pre 9/11, when people could meet you at the gate, like getting off the plane out of the tunnel. Huge gathering. I still have video of it. It made the news. And so we were celebrities, and I was like high on life. And then this moment happened where I was riding my bike in the bike lane. I was riding my bike to the high school. I was in 8th grade, but I was riding my bike to the high school because I was at such an elevated level of math. They didn't have a math class for me at my middle school. So I needed to go to high school to take geometry. And there was only like 4 of us that, from the 8th grade, that were taking high school math. So I was riding early in the morning, and I came up to an intersection where there was a stop sign on my right but I was riding in the bike lane of a 45-mile-an-hour street. We didn't have a stop. So as this car on the right pulled up to the stop sign, it was clear that she wasn't going to stop at the stop sign. And it looked to me like she was going to go all the way into the bike lane. It didn't look like she saw me. And so it looked like she was going to hit me. And she would have if I would have kept going. But in order to avoid getting hit by her, I swerved left, not thinking that there's more danger over there. I was swerving to avoid getting hit by a car, maybe traveling 5 miles an hour. Worst case scenario would have, tipped my bike over. But I swerved right out left into the slow lane and pulled right out in front of a car. He had no time to even see me, let alone stop. And thankfully, my bike went over the car. Because if my bike goes under the car, there's no chance. Mm-hmm. My bike goes over the car. I go over the car. I get flipped in the air. I black out somewhere in the air. When I open my eyes, I have this moment where I don't know where I am. And I had flipped to where I was looking backwards toward traffic. And I see cars coming at me. And there's just this moment where I'm going to die because these cars are extremely close and they're going fast. And I mean, if you could just imagine flipping over one car and now being in the lane for the next car behind it, that was the scenario. And I had this moment of surrender. I truly don't know how I got out of the bike lane. What happened is I stood up to try to run, but I collapsed because my left leg had been almost severed. It had been shattered. So my left leg just immediately collapsed. So as I got up to run, I fell back down in the slow lane. And I had this moment looking back at these cars, and I asked God if I could be spared, just please don't take me today. And I somehow got out of the lane. Next thing I know, there's a woman praying over me, asking God to spare my life. And it happened to be the woman who crossed over the stop sign. And then everything goes fast and slow simultaneously. I end up going to the hospital. They end up doing experimental surgery. I don't find out till like 30 years later, probably 25 years later, that had the surgery not worked, they were going to amputate my leg. They told that to my parents, but they didn't tell that to me. And eventually it worked. I have my real leg. All things considered, from the detail of the accident, it took me a couple of years to get back on the baseball field, but I survived. But later that night of the accident, when I was in the hospital room, I had this very clear vision of myself as an old man looking back at my life. And I could feel regret. And I remember thinking, what if I wouldn't have done drugs? What if I wouldn't have become an alcoholic? What if I wouldn't have joined the gang? Like in my future premonition here, I had made all these mistakes in my life, and I was questioning what would it have been like if I wouldn't have done that? And then the question that I feel every time I say it is, what could I have become? And then I was kind of zapped back into the present moment of this 13-year-old boy having been given this gift of wisdom. And I just made a promise to myself in that moment. I will not live this life, especially after this gift I got today, with regret. And I learned we don't have any idea when we're leaving this earth, because I was just high on life and I could have been taken out. We have no idea. And if I have no idea I'm going to give whatever it takes. And this promise to myself that I wouldn't live life with regrets caused me to change the way I look at everything. It caused me to change the way I looked at my parents' marriage, which wasn't a good one. It changed who I started hanging out with. It changed my idea of success. I started reading books on success. It changed my interest in goal setting. Like it literally, I literally and figuratively changed lanes that day.
Yeah. Great way to put it. Yes.
It put me on a complete different path. And so it gave me the gift of mortality as a 13-year-old. And I've really lived my life since then being afraid of that regret, being afraid of doing something that I'll never be able to go back and change. So can I read you this poem?
Absolutely. We need to hear this. Let's take a quick break. And on the other side of it, we'll be right back. And we're back. Oh, Sean, I'm so happy we are having this conversation and continuing it, because I really do want people to hear some of what is your heart, but it's also your art and creativity. It is so profound and impactful. So would you tell what you want to tell, but I want them to hear your spoken word, your poetry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because of the date being very meaningful, obviously, this is like my rebirth day. Every year I do something, whether it's just reflection, maybe talk to somebody or do a Facebook Live or send an email or something, just reflecting on the day. And last year, but I never written about it, like actual, any kind of poetry or anything. So last year, I just had one of those divine downloads. I was getting ready to share a post or something on Facebook, and it just came to me. And the essence of it, as you'll see, is me remembering that boy, because I made a promise that night to that boy. I made a promise that I would chase his dreams. And I made a promise that I wouldn't take his life for granted anymore. And so frequently I have to go back to that moment. I have to go back to that promise, because our promises are not to our current self. The promises that we've made in any kind of similar way are promises to our past selves. They're promises that we made when we were in a particularly down period of our life, saying, I won't let this happen. I won't let anybody else do that to us ever again. And from that moment, it's like we're starting the next chapter. And I believe one of the most powerful things we can do is identify our sacred promises that we've made to ourselves and keep them. So this poem is called Dear Little Shawnee, which is what my dad used to call me when I was young. Dear little Shawnee, you always had that look in your eye, like you were going places. You always watched people passing by trying to read what's on their faces. You always wanted to be the best at everything you did, but you always thought you were a pest, and that's why you often hid. I get it. You never wanted to be in anybody's way. I get it. You always wanted to know if everyone would stay. If they know how tender your heart really is, would they listen to what you say? If they knew who you really truly are, would they love you anyway? These thoughts, young man, will always cause you so much pain and doubt. But these thoughts, young man, will also help you figure yourself out. These thoughts, young Shawnee, will so often make you doubt that you're enough. But these thoughts, young Shawnee, will actually help you when times get dark and tough. I know you question if you measure up and whether you belong, but because you question everything, your mind will remain strong. So these questions, Shawnee, the same ones that cause you so much grief, are the questions, Shawnee, that will someday give the answers that you seek. So keep questioning, keep wondering, keep curiously exploring, keep doubting, keep worrying, keep constantly ignoring the temptation to stop the mental journey and hide inside your cave, because a docked ship, you are not. You were built to ride the waves. It won't be quick. Some lessons take time, and you'll have to keep your calm. It won't be easy. Some waves are big, like the one you'll ride with mom. But from the tops of the highest waves, young man, is where your eyes can furthest see. And from the depths of the darkest waters, young man, is where you'll truly learn to be. Like in the middle of that slow lane of Alvarado Niles, broken leg, spinning mind. You crawled for what seemed miles. You saved my life that day. And the truth is, I don't know how you made it. You gave me life that day. It was my debt, but you paid it. So on this sacred day, young Shawnee, I celebrate your divinity. And on this sacred day, young Shawnee, I cease to be your enemy. I promised you on that hospital bed that I'd never leave. You remember? That I'd fight for every last goal you have. I think it's time that I remember. So please keep dreaming. Please keep screaming, because you see, I really need it. You remind me of our vision when life gets tough and I can't see it. Look me in your eyes, our eyes, so you can see that I really mean it. I'll keep seeking, I'll keep climbing, and I'll keep chasing if you dream it. I love you, Shawnee. Stay curious, young man.
Beautiful. That is one of the things I'm learning this year and grappling with is the fact that there are that the divinity that is within me and that this all-encompassing person that is me is made up of a body, a mind, and a soul. And they all have a voice, and they all are important and carry important weight, if you will. And so there was this whole picture that you just painted of this unification of all the parts of you. I'm having a hard time saying it, but it just is a beautiful kind of, this is who I am. This is who I am in my soul. There's so much more than just this body and this person, but there's this soul and this beautiful presence that I'm speaking to myself. That for me is very much like God. And so for me, like, God lives within my soul, right? And so I picture this being a dialogue back and forth. And some might say, well, how can you have a dialogue back and forth? But that poetry exemplifies how one can have a conversation, an inner conversation, I guess.
Yeah, that's beautiful the way you put it. And so much of the work that I do in personal development is all around our relationship with ourselves. It's our relationship with our inner child. And when we heal that, there's a reintegration that most people experience. Because the truth is, most of us are separated from ourselves, whether it's moments in time or identities or things that we haven't forgiven ourselves for. The ultimate separation is internal. And when we do the work and internally reintegrate, it's beautiful beyond words. And it's so healing and it's so liberating.
But here's what's interesting. So you're talking about relationship with your inner child, but what's amazing about your story is that you had a conversation in a way with your older age self in that bed, that vision that you were given as an old man, and the feeling of regret and remorse and looking back over one's life. So you have both the benefit of hindsight, foresight, inner child, old wise man. Like, that's crazy that you were given all of that perspective.
And I think we all have that if we're willing to tap in. You know, I think that's our spiritual connection to, as you said earlier, God, universe, spirit, whatever the label is. I think we all have more wisdom than most of us allow ourselves to access.
Yeah. Yeah. And to me, the greatest remorse and regret is to miss that because I'm so busy or blind or scared or don't want to go into the feelings and the vulnerability. And so I miss it. Like that would be a remorse for me, is that I didn't see it all this time. And while I'm walking on this earth in this human body, that I missed all of that.
Bingo. That's, you know, I think the most beautiful parts of the human journey are the ones that we are trying to avoid. We're trying to avoid the pain. We're trying to avoid feeling. And yet it's what makes us uniquely human. And it gives us the most profoundly human experiences. And so I have made a similar promise to myself in my older years that at the end of my life, I want to have met myself. And I think it's so easy for us to just always try to get out of the present moment because that's where the pain is, and try to get to the next moment, whether it's get to the weekend so we can get out of this job, or get to the next relationship, or I don't like what I'm feeling, so let me drown it in drugs, alcohol, sex, success, shopping, whatever. And then we create this pattern where we're constantly trying to get out of, we're constantly trying to escape the present moment.
Yeah.
To get to the next one, because the next one hopefully is going to be better. It's not going to be as bad as this one. And the net effect of that over the course of patterns becoming cemented into habits is a lot of people get to the end of their life, and really what they've been doing is avoiding themselves the whole way.
Yeah. You want to know what's so crazy? And there are no accidents, my friend. You know this. So I decided to get sober 6 days ago.
Wow.
So I'm on my 6th day of sobriety in a 35-year relationship, a very complex relationship with alcohol, namely wine, who I've labeled my lover, my best friend. I mean, it's a freaking grief. I'm just telling you. And 2 hours ago, before we started recording this podcast, all the wine, everything's still in my house. And it's like everything's talking to me, and it all just seems so wonderful. And why in God's name, what kind of fresh hell is this that I would quit drinking at the holidays and blah, 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 blah.
Right.
So I literally, with my awesome 17-year-old son, who knows I've been at AA meetings every morning this week at 6:30 in the morning. help me pack it all up and put the wine rack on Facebook Marketplace. I mean, it's just like, this is so crazy. But I have to say, and the reason I'm talking about this is because it's obviously by design that everything you're talking about, everything you just said, I think that I would be forsaking if I continue to drink, whether it's problematic, at times it is, and other times I look like any normal drinker having wine. It doesn't matter. It's become a way of not feeling or being fully present.
Yeah.
And so what I came to the understanding of in this last few weeks, and it's taken, I've known it's been a complicated issue that I wanted to give up for a long time. But I used to always say I can't ever develop a real problem with alcohol because I can't ever give it up, which is exactly what an alcoholic would say. It's so freaking ironic. So, but I realized I would be giving up. I thought to myself, okay, I have 35 years of drinking under my belt. I'm a 50-year-old woman. I believe I got 35 more good years solid, God willing more. Maybe this next 35 could be a different experience of this life and my soul and experiencing emotions and feeling the feelings, not numbing them. And yeah, so everything you just said speaks to exactly what I'm trying to create now.
Wow.
And I mean, dude, I'm 5 days in. I'm not going to lie. So I don't have a huge amount of wisdom to offer because I'm just trying to do 24 hours at a time.
Well, let me just celebrate you, congratulations on that decision. I think most people have decided to let go of whatever their vices or addictions are, but most people don't ever do it. They just decide to do it. So the fact that you took action on it and brought your son into it and, have the wisdom to put the rack on the marketplace and remove some of the temptations is really noble, Jen. Congratulations on that. And thank you for sharing that.
I didn't expect to be sharing that. So I guess that's, but I was clearly meant to, because there's an accountability in outing that and developing my new identity. My old identity is one, and but I'm developing a new identity. And so thank you.
That's huge. It really truly is an identity journey.
It is. And I want to, can I ask a clarifying question too? Because now you really have me thinking. When you, as that old man in the bed, and had that moment where you looked back and you referenced gangs, drugs, alcohol, all that, do you believe, was that actually something you walked through, or was that a foreshadowing? It was like you were getting a glimpse of this was the trajectory and path your life was on. This beautiful bike accident, car crushing accident, is the very gift that took you off the trajectory you were on. It's like you got to see where it was going to go and you went, no, I'm going this way. Is that what that was?
Nobody's ever asked me that. No, I wasn't into drugs, alcohol. I wasn't into any of that. It was just a premonition of, you better avoid that stuff.
Yeah. So that's what makes me go, holy God. Like,
that's wild.
It is. Well, that's what makes me go, it was a premonition of, this is like you were riding your bike down Alvarado Niles, and had that not happened as the years went on, maybe that was going to be your life.
Well, a lot of the friends
on a different course.
Yeah, a lot of the friends that I hung out with at the time did end up in jail on drugs, in gangs. One of them hung himself in jail just a few years ago. He was like my best friend. He's who I wanted to be like when we were in elementary school. So I did make some significant changes but not because I was already on the path, but I was about to. I was going into those formative years of middle teenage, young, finding yourself, where do you belong? And the fear of regret is what kept me away. And I've always lived my life afraid of doing something that I could never go back and change. I've only been drunk one time in my life, and I didn't drink alcohol at all till like a few years ago. I was drunk one time in college though, but that was over a bet. That wasn't because I was like just a drinker. And I actually had a really good experience, fun experience. I didn't have a hangover, nothing, but I had always just made a promise to myself, dating, going back to that premonition, that alcohol is something that scared me because I didn't want to do something while I was drunk and unaware and not be able to ever go back and change it. And I had a friend in high school who was drunk and racing cars on one of the city streets, and he hit a tree and his girlfriend was in the passenger seat, and either one or both of her legs were lost. I don't remember if it was one or both, but I remember thinking, for the rest of his life, every time he looks in the mirror, he knows somebody doesn't have a leg because he was drunk. And that terrified me. So even now, I kind of like the idea of drinking more than actually drinking. I think I'm kind of making up for some of my earlier years where I didn't, go out and bar hop. But I don't allow myself to lose my awareness. And there's no doubt that it's directly because of that promise I made myself in the hospital room that night. Because if I don't have my awareness, then I might do something I'll regret, but can never change. Right. So that fear has fueled me. And it doesn't always create good things. Like one of the things that I don't do well is plan for the future, because I don't know if I'm going to have a future. So I learned to be in the present moment so ferociously that sometimes I don't value the future. So it has its pros and cons, but for the most part, I am aware and try to stay present to everything, even the tough stuff, even the deep shame and emotions. And I mean, I had an episode 2 days ago where I was alone by myself here in this studio, and I fell on the ground and started wailing and crying and grieving a previous identity and past regrets and all that. But I've learned to value those moments as a human experience. And that's what that's how I language it. I'm having a human experience right now. Oh, it sucks, but I'll take it. I'll take the painful human experience over no human experience.
I am getting slowly but surely better at that. I want to get better about that. And for many people, it's not a big deal, but for me, it's unpredictable. I can be normal all the time with it, and then I can be blackout drunk, as I was a matter of weeks ago, and made no sense. And all I went is, this is ridiculous that I keep doing this. I don't care if it's once a year or once a month. And then every time else I'm normal. This is not who I'm called to be, and it's not who I want to be. And I'm missing out. I'm missing chunks of life. And wow. It is only, as you were saying that, I don't know how I've been so fortunate with my 35-year history of drinking and drinking excessively. I'm embarrassed to admit, especially high school and college, I drove drunk so many times. I don't know how I didn't crash or kill someone, but my time's up, my friend. The law of averages, let's just look at statistics. Yeah. My time is up, and there will be a DUI and something horrific in my future. And so therefore we can no longer take the risk. Right.
Good for you.
And so,
that's powerful.
I don't, that idea of it's bad enough to just wake up the next morning and then feel fuzzy about the conversation because you had too much and you're like, wait, what did I say? Did I sound? And then you're trying to piece it together. That feels terrible enough. That's a remorse I've known for 35 years.
Yeah.
But I thought it was manageable enough, and I always did okay and did fine, and it never disrupted or upended my life. And I do well and I'm successful and I'm talented. But I thought, Jen, imagine if you took this out of the equation and you really felt and you were truly vulnerable and you really did the hard thing, which for me is not drinking, and imagine what's possible in the next 35 years. So that's what I cling to.
That's
what's
so
possible and what I
powerful.
won't miss out on.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what you'll experience that you have been missing out on. That's so powerful. I think the beauty in what you're saying is that when people try to make behavior changes, especially with deep emotional addictions or vices or anything that's, just got their grips on us, we tend to just try to stop doing something rather than start doing something else. Mm-hmm. And the way you worded it is really critical, because now you have a thing to do instead of just a thing to not do.
Right.
And when people only try to use their willpower and discipline and try to resist the temptation that for the rest of their life, they're not going to drink, but they don't replace not drinking with something else, it's extremely hard for the human brain to do that. So I love, where you're at in just a few days into your journey, because now you have a choice. It's not wine or no wine. It's wine or life, or wine or human experience. So now you actually have two things to choose between rather than just one thing to say yes or no to.
Yes.
And that's going to be so helpful for you. And hopefully anybody that's still, listening to this and being touched by this message in some way. That's one of the best things we can do, is replace the target with a new target that has something that's inviting and exciting and something to do with living and loving and being present. That's what I've heard most people have replaced their temptations with. And then doesn't make it necessarily any easier for anybody. It's still emotionally difficult. We're talking about neurological patterns and associations that you have and all kinds of stuff. Doesn't make any of that stuff go away. But hopefully it gives you something else to use during those moments when you can be present and human. And I love how you said your time is up. You're just no longer willing to take those risks, because at some point in time, one of those risks is gonna go the wrong way. So again, congratulations, Jen, and thank you for sharing that. I feel honored and very touched that you shared that with me on this podcast.
I know.
Just a few days. You
heard it here first, folks.
I know, right? Oh, that's so good.
Yeah. It's all right. I trust the process. If there's anything I've learned, I trust the process. And it's what we're running towards, not running away from necessarily. What am I running towards, and what kind of life am I creating, and what do I want versus what I think I can't have? Yeah. My friend, you're fantastic. Thank you.
As are you. Thank you for the conversation.
This is what I love and appreciate about you as a human being. And these conversations is that you don't necessarily know where they're gonna go, but it's a safe container to it goes where it goes and lead. And I thank you too. I just celebrate you this day, and that you are very much 35 years. Today's 35 years.
35 years today. Yeah. I'm 48.
Years
I was 13 at the time.
Oh, that's amazing. 35
Which is it.
years.
It's 35 years, Jen. That's your number 2.
Oh my God. No, come on. There are no accidents. The synchronicity of that is beautiful and divine.
That's amazing.
Oh my gosh. I'm so happy you picked up on that. I didn't pick up on it.
Yeah. I didn't catch it before, just now.
Woo! That's Beautiful. Oh, you can't make this stuff up, friends.
No, you can't.
You cannot make this stuff up. Oh, you're the best. Let's keep talking. Let's keep having conversations. And can I throw a little bug in your ear?
Yes.
Dude, you need to do another talk, whether it's TED or something else, on figuring out what that word is. That's the opposite of namaste.
Oh, okay.
The I witness your pain word. There's got to be a word for that. And there is so much to that. That is, to me, one of the most powerful, profound things I can think of right now is witnessing one another's pain and seeing, I see your pain and acknowledge it. I think that's the essence of being human and a feeling human. It's what separates us from the animals and from other living things, maybe.
It truly does.
There's something about that's sticking in my craw now, my friend.
Well, thank you for saying that. I hadn't really thought about that on a TEDx stage or anything bigger than, just sometimes mentioning it in these conversations. But I agree. I think it will do a lot of the connecting work just on its own. And then we can lean in and have the neutrality and reintegrate.
Thank you, my friend.
You didn't tell me that when we recorded this podcast, you would speed up time and make a couple hours plus go by so fast.
I don't know how it happens.
That's the power of just really deep present conversation. So thank you for the invitation, and thank you for this podcast and being willing to do what you're doing and inviting me into a sacred conversation that I won't forget.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm grateful to all of you for being a part of this conversation and listening deeply and just joining us in this, because this isn't just a conversation between Shauna and I today. This is very much about you joining us, and I'm grateful for you. We'll see you next week. Thank you all. Listen for Real is produced in Rockland, California, and is edited and mixed with the help of Marky B. Our music, entitled Zero, is created and performed by the amazing Shannon Curtis. Please subscribe, rate, and review, and we will see you next time.